Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, the channel where we are making a computer role-playing game using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In the last video, I talked about ways to randomly generate a character, and that can be a good method to use, but there are a couple of possible problems with it. The first one is that you might, on particular plays of the game, get a character whose attributes are all really high, in which case it might be that the game isn't very challenging for the player, or that all of their attributes are very low, so that the game is impossible. Whatever they do, the character will sort of fail at, and so they can't get through whatever choices they make. And neither of those outcomes are particularly fun, necessarily. And another possible problem with random generation is simply that a lot of people just prefer to be able to build their own character and customize their own character and choose their own attributes. So you might want to think about having a system where the player can choose the attributes that their character has, and that's what I've created a simple version of, and that's what I'll be talking about in this video. So we see that when we start the program, we have these 5 attributes. They're meant to be strength, intelligence, dexterity, constitution, and charisma. Obviously, the names of the attributes doesn't particularly matter. And they're all set to 10 initially. And then it says you may continue or further adjust your character's attributes. And we see that each of the attributes has this set of 2 arrows on either side of it. If I was doing this properly, I probably wouldn't have, I've just used greater and lesser than signs. I probably would have used an actual picture instead, but just to demonstrate it, I've just used characters. And we can see that if we click on, for example, strength, now we have 11 strength, 12 strength. We can also reduce our attributes, and we can go as high as 20, it should be. And then at 20, the arrow to increase it disappears, and we can go as low as 1, and then the arrow to reduce it further disappears. And we should also notice that it will tell us how we're going with the total number of points. When we started, every one of the attributes was 10, so obviously the total of that is 50. If we add these up, we get 20, 30, 40, 51, 52, so that's 2 higher, and we find that, as we would expect, it says you must take 2 points from your character's attributes. So, for example, we might reduce that by 1 and that by 1, and then now that that is at 50, it tells you, or it tells the player that you can continue, and so we can keep mucking around with it if we want, or we could just continue, we could accept that and keep going. And of course, I haven't written what happens when you continue, because this video is just about demonstrating the system for choosing your attributes. So that's what I've done, and I'm going to spend the rest of the video talking about the code that allows that to happen. So let's get into that. Go over to the relevant part. So there's actually only 2 screens, or 2 pages. So let's go through those one at a time, and as usual, I'll zoom in so it's a bit easier to read. So we set AN as the number of attributes, and I've chosen to use 5. Then we have an AT, which is an array which has the names of the attributes. As always, starting with, when we do a list like this, we start with a null, so that slot 0 isn't used, and we can just start from 1, because I find that easier. Then we choose how many points the player has to distribute. What are they going to start at? We have an array for the current value of each attribute. And then we have MA and MI, which are the maximum and minimum values that we're going to allow. And then we have BA, which is balance. And that starts as this formula here, which is how many points you PT, which is how many points you have to distribute, minus the starting value of the attributes times the number of attributes. So in this particular case, the balance will start at 0 because it'll be 50 minus 5 times 10, which adds up to 0. But there's no necessity to have it like that. You could have it set up so that the player has to add or subtract attributes if you wanted to. And then it's just a reminder that Z is going to be a temporary variable. And then we have this for loop, which I introduced in the last video. I'll go through it once more. Start with Z equals 1. Add 1 to Z at the end of every execution of the instructions, or in this case only one instruction, and keep doing the loop for as long as Z is under or equal to AN, which is the number of attributes. And the command, the only command in the loop, is set AVZ to SV. In other words, set the value of attribute number Z to SV, which is what we've chosen to be our starting value, which in this case is 10. So it'll set AV1 to 10, 2 to 10, 3 to 10, 4 to 10, 5 to 10, and then Z will be 6. It will look at this and see that Z is no longer under or equal to 5, and it will stop executing it. And once we've done all that, we go to attributes, which is the screen where we adjust things. Now, this is, I'm going to introduce this command, which is table, which is a HTML command, meaning that it's part of the sort of standard language that is used for websites and for laying out websites. A table is a graphical, well, it's like when you draw a table, or if you have ever worked with Excel or a similar spreadsheet, you probably have made a table, and it's a grid basically. And the reason we do this is it makes it easier to line things up in a neat way, and that'll become more apparent as I go through. So we have div align equals center, which you will remember from the last video just means this paragraph is going to be centered in the center of the screen. And then if we scroll all the way down to find one that's aligned with it, we'll see that we have to put slash table and slash div. Note that they only have one set of greater than or lesser thans around them, whereas this command and others have two. The difference is that div and table are HTML commands, and this if is sort of part of it's part of a separate language, really. It's part of Twine's own language, which can be a bit confusing if you're not already familiar with HTML, but unfortunately that is the way that it is. So we start with a table. We have one of these for loops in exactly the same form. In fact, it's exactly the same as the last one, which is start at Z equals 1, add 1 to Z at the end of each run through, and keep doing this as long as Z is under or equal to AN. The previous for loop only had one command in it. This one has, as you can see, quite a lot, everything up to this point. So let's go through what we've got here. TR and TD are parts of the table command. TR means table row. I don't remember what the D stands for, but TD is start a new cell. The way that tables work is that you have, and I'll just do an example here, you have TR, which is start a new row, then you have TD, some text, end TD, TD, more text, end TD, TD, yet more text, end TD, and then slash damn it, /tr to end the row. Then you start another row, and you might have td/td, like an empty cell. And the point of doing all this is, as I say, to line things up. If I was to run this table, because we've got a cell with some text, a cell with some text, a cell with some text. We've got an empty cell, and then 2 cells with text. The point is that this second cell would be lined up with this second cell, and this third cell would be lined up with this. Oops, sorry, I've just realised I made a mistake. I put /t. There we go. This third cell will be lined up with this third cell, and that can be quite useful when you're trying to set out data, which is what I'm trying to do here. So we have this loop. So we tr and td. That's always the beginning of a table. You always have to have at least one row and at least one cell if you want to display anything. And what this means is when it's telling the computer when to display the option to reduce the particular attribute by 1. So if AVZ, that is, if the current attribute value is more than MI, and you remember that MI is the minimum value that attributes can go down to. In this case, it's 1. So if the attribute is more than 1, then do this. And what this does is it will print something like this. I'll do this because it makes it a bit clearer. So it'll print something like that, except the only difference will be that 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 will be, they will change. And the computer recognizes that when it says print something that's in these brackets, it doesn't mean literally print these characters. It will recognize that is a link, and to print it as a link, and it will recognize that this is the text that you print. This is the target, so it's sending us back to the page that we're currently on, but that we are to change a couple of things. We are to reduce, minus means reduce that attribute by 1, or that variable by 1, and plus means increase that variable by 1. So this will reduce AV2, i.e. the value of the second attribute, by 1, and it will add 1 to the balance. And BA is keeping track of whether we have too many points in our character or not enough, or exactly the right amount. So we can take one away, and it'll update the balance so that we'll have to add something somewhere else. And then, as I say, we end that TD and start another one. That align equals right just means put the characters as far to the right in the cell as you can, and then print ATZ, which means print the name of the attribute. So it'll be STR or INT or whatever it might be. And the reason to justify all of them is just that it looks a bit neater if they're all lined up on the right-hand side. And then we have yet another cell, which is print a colon. Then we have another one, which is also aligned to the right. Now print AVZ, which is the numerical value. So the result of these three together, and the reason for putting the numerical values to the right is because that makes the numbers line up. If you have a single digit, say 8, and you have a double digit, say 12, you want the 8 to be over the 2, not over the 1, just because that's how we add up numbers, and so it sort of looks neater to us. But anyway, the combination, the effect of these three cells which I've highlighted is to print the name of the attribute, so str for example, then a colon, then its value, say 12 or 10 or whatever it might be. Then we have, this is sort of the opposite of the one up here, or rather, no, not here. This one up here is to give you the option to reduce the attribute in question. This one here is to give the option to increase it. So if AVZ is under MA, which is the maximum that an attribute can be, so 20 in this particular case, then print all this out, and that will print a link which will go to attributes, i.e. will take us back to the screen that we're on, but it will alter AVZ by adding 1 to it, and then to sort of compensate for that, to remind us that we have to adjust somewhere else to balance it out, it will reduce BA, which is sort of balance, by 1. Remembering that plus plus means add 1 and minus minus means take 1 away. And then we finish with /tr, which just means end the row. And because the for loop ends then, it will then do what it's told to do up here, which is add 1 to Z and then check if Z is under or equal to AN, and do the whole thing again unless Z has become more than AN, in other words, once it gets to 6. So because of that, it doesn't try and find the value of or the name of the 6th attribute, which doesn't exist, of course. So that is our table, and then we do that to close off the paragraph. And then, and this is much simpler, this is just telling us where the where our balance is at and giving us the option to continue if that's appropriate. So if the balance is 1, it says you have 1 point still to distribute. If the balance is not 1, but it's more than 0, it says you have BA points still to distribute. The only difference between this one and this one, if I didn't have this and BA was 1, it would say you have 1 points still to distribute, which, you know, you may not care about. I could have done something like that, but I just thought it was neater to have 1 point or many points. And then similarly, if it's -1, you must take 1 point from your character's attributes. And this option is you must take, so let's say BA is -5, this will end up printing you must take 5 points from your character's attributes. Or when we are at 0, you may continue or further adjust your character's attributes. So that gives you the option to finalize your character and move on. And that is how, or that is one way to have a system which lets the player choose their attributes. As I say, if I sort of was doing it properly, I'd probably want to make it look a little bit better. I'd certainly want to have pictures for the arrows and maybe sound effects every time you click it. It you know, makes a little noise or something. But that was good enough just to demonstrate how to do it. One of the things you might have noticed if you've been following along is that we've been giving the player a choice of what race they want their character to be, and in this version, I haven't got any option for race. And that's something that I will be looking at in a future video. But I hope that what I talked about today was useful or interesting to some of you, and I hope you will join me next time.